to be here to be able to introduce my friend Lynn Talbot. Lynn, as I've oftentimes referred to her as the oldest pilgrim in the room, not by age, but by her first walk was in 1974, and I've always been very jealous of that. Lynn is a full professor at Roanoke College, and she and her son in 2011 published a collection of essays that's called Younger Pilgrims on the Camino, and they collected stories by younger pilgrims, obviously not many of us, persons who walked the Camino before age 25, and they published that whenever they walked. So some of those were from pilgrims from 1974, 1979, 1980s, but their recollections of how the pilgrimage changed them. Since then, Lynn has been a faithful attendee at the national gatherings, and for the last, since 2002, she thinks she's been to basically all of them. She was one of the infamous survivors of Lake Tahoe last year. And the thing I love most about traveling with Lynn is she has a photographic memory for geography and places and things that she's seen. She's always looking for little interesting tidbits. Oh, did you know that there's a fountain there that says this? No, I didn't. I walked right by it. So we are in for a treat today as she shows us magical moments in Santiago de Compostela. Don't leave Santiago just to go running out to finish there. Stay around and look at all the cool stuff in town.
I want to take you to that day, that last day of your Camino, when you're getting ready to arrive in Santiago. Some of you remember that, right? And you're all excited. You're finally going to make it to Santiago. And you start out, you're full of energy, you want to get there, and you walk through the interminable suburbs of Santiago. And finally, you cross the street and you step into the historic quarter. And you're surrounded by those lovely buildings. And if you're on the Camino Frances, you start hearing in the distance the lovely sounds of the bagpipe player beside the cathedral. And you walk down the steps through that darkened passageway, the arch, and you step out into the Obradoiro Square. And those emotions come flowing over you, excitement, tears, hugging your friends that you've seen, and you walk to the center of the Obradoiro Square and you look up at that absolutely amazing cathedral, fortunately now not covered in scaffolding. And you take your pictures, you hug the pilgrims that you haven't seen since how far back it was. And then you go down to the pilgrim's office, and you get your Compostela, and you come back up to the cathedral, you go to the pilgrim's mass, and if you're really lucky, you get to see the Botafumeiro swing. And then, poof, you're gone. You head out to the airport or the train station to leave. You keep walking to Finisterre, and I'm here today to tell you, build in a couple of days, a week, Santiago, because it's an amazing place. And I'm going to share with you my secrets of Santiago. Okay, so we got to have a little bit of history first, right? These photographs come from an exhibition that was in the Pilgrimage Museum about 10 years ago, and I really like these because they give you a sense of how Santiago has changed over the years. This, they claimed, was 829. How they know, I don't know. But anyway, and I'm sorry to say that all the little numbers, I didn't take pictures of those, but we can kind of guess what the things are. Number one is the chapel that was built over the tomb by Alfonso II the Chaste. And what I liked about this, I don't know if it's true or not, historically correct or not, but it looks like it's a stockade from the Wild West around the city. But they needed a city wall to keep out marauders and also maybe to keep out wild animals, perhaps. So that proved to be pretty small. So in 899, another church was built over the site of the tomb. And you can see that the walls are looking better. And this is the church that was destroyed in 899 by 997, excuse me, I got the wrong dates. 997 by Al-Mansur, the Arab general who swept north and destroyed everything except for St. James's tomb, because it was sacred. And then in 1075, construction began on the cathedral, number 14 there in the picture, and it was consecrated in 1211. This is the cathedral that we see today, only the outside doesn't look at all like this anymore. The inside, most of it is still what was there, but things have been added on the outside of the cathedral, so it doesn't look like this picture at all. You notice lovely city walls, well constructed, and so what do we see of what's left here? Just signs, because if you're coming in on the French road, you will walk into Spain, into Santiago, at the Porta do Camino, the Camino gate. This is where the gate would have been that you would have walked through to get into Santiago. If you had come down from, Ferrol on the Camino Inglés, you actually will see perhaps a bit of a city wall left here. But all that's left from the gate, the Porta da Pena, is a street name. You come in on the street, Rua da Porta da Pena. If you're coming in from Portugal, you have Rua da Porta Facheira. This is where the Facheira gate was. And of course you can't see it very well because you've got all of those canvas awnings of all the sidewalk cafes that are at that place now. But if you are coming in on the Camino San Andres, there's still a gate left to see. This is the Porta da Macerelos. It's the only gate that is left of the city walls. So here's your opportunity to see a bit of history. And you actually can see a little bit of wall there too. So check for the San Andres route. And of course, this is a map. I don't know whose map it was, somebody's Ultreya Tours. What I think is interesting is that the wall, the roads around the city follow what would have been the walls, more or less. Because when the streets were put in, the walls might still have been there. Not modern streets, but in the past. So, I was so excited. This is Rua Vilar, which happens to be my favorite street in Santiago. And I saw this building that had a shell on it, and I thought, this is so cool. There must have been a pilgrim, and this is probably a medieval version of one of those tiles that you can buy in the store that say, hey, a pilgrim lives here. And I was so excited. I thought, this is so cool. And then George Grenia filled in the gap. Burst my bubble. Look at that. Isn't that shell lovely? Wouldn't you like to think that a pilgrim had built his house and put a shell on it because I walked the Camino? But no dice. It's called a marca de propiedad, a property mark. And back in the day, 16th to the 18th century, when a building was built, you had to have money. And the only people that had money were ecclesiastic organizations, big groups, because to build in stone cost money. And then these buildings would be leased and then subleased to tenants. How do you know who does the building belong to? Well, you put your property mark on it. And what I think is amazing is this is unique to Santiago. You don't find this anywhere else in Spain. And they think that perhaps as many of 800 of these marks existed at one time. By the way, I've taken this information from a professor at the University of Santiago who has studied all of this, and but it's mostly available in Spanish. So I wanted to share it with you here today. They think around 200, 250 can still be seen in the historic center of Santiago. So when you're walking the streets, keep your eye out for them. And I'm going to show you what I call the big five. There are actually more groups than that, but there are five that you are likely to see. The first, obviously, is the shell. It belonged to the Cabildo of the cathedral. The Cabildo is the governing body. And you can see here on the, you can see here we've got actually 3 shells. You sometimes will see the initials STO around this to indicate it. And if you've stayed out at the Seminario Menor, and you go down the hill and then you go up the other side, you better remember that. Yes. There are a series of houses. I assume they were originally houses. They're like townhouses, one beside the other, that are gone now. But this part of the entrance to the house remains. We've got the shells that go up the hill. So if you're staying out there, you can check those out. I think it's a park now is what it looks like. Okay, so we have the cathedral, the Cabildo building houses. You have the monastery of San Martin Pinario. And of course, what do you have? You've got trees, pine trees. These look like the umbrella pines. And notice that they're all kind of slightly different. They have SM for San Martin. The Concello de Santiago, this is not, they're not 100% convinced that this is who it is, but what you have is a chalice and a host. And some of these buildings you can see, like this one, it's right there. It's kind of hard to see. Not in terribly good shape. These are not necessarily, they've not been kept up. The University of Santiago built some of these. They have the 5 stars. And this says, let me see if I can read it. These 5 houses belong to the University of Santiago de Compostela, and it actually gives us the year of 1666 that these were built. This is another one here. So, again, you can see the stars aren't quite the same. So obviously different stonemasons were putting in these property marks. Another group is the Hospital Real, which we know as the Parador, the main square. And they have this cross, and it often has an OSP. They have some initials around it too to indicate. This is actually the Parador, and they use that as their symbol at the Parador. And then, finally, let me see if I can get this. The Brotherhood of Santo Espiritu, they had a bird. Sometimes it looks like a chicken. They're not sure. Maybe this chicken is from another group. But you've got a bird there. You've got a bird there. This Tertulia is a wonderful cafe. If you're walking out to Finisterre, you will walk past it. Okay, so as you walk around the streets, you can just see these on the buildings. It's very, very cool. And I actually have had someone say to me, I can't walk without seeing them now. However, many of these marcas have been destroyed. I think that there might have been 800. There are only 200, 250 left. So you can see, what do they do with them? They put things over them. There you've got a street number over this. And you can see that sometimes this has been uncovered, but they would have been covered over with whatever substance that is. I don't know, but like stucco or something. And this is my favorite, because this obviously was on some building. The building got torn down, and you know that they reused the stone from construction. You're not going to throw it away, so you just put it back up. This one got put up upside down. This was clearly a pine tree from San Martin. So this person down here, we have the map comes from this person, and they have identified all of the marks that they have been able to identify. And it's done by who they belong to. So on the left-hand side, you have the ones that belong to the cathedral. And it's kind of interesting because you can see they're grouped in certain areas. A whole bunch of these coming down from the cathedral, and it's sort of in general in the cathedral area, but yet down here you've got another whole section where you'll just find house after house. I was in Santiago 3 years ago with a group of my students, and every morning they had 4 hours of Spanish class, and I was free. And so I used these maps, and I wandered all over Santiago and went into sections of the city that I had never been into, searching out these buildings and taking pictures. I mean, anyway, here's San Martín Pinario. Notice again, they're clustered in certain areas and then a few scattered elsewhere. But they have a map for each one of these different marcas so that you can look them all up if you're interested in them. Okay, so now I'd like to take you on a little walking tour of Santiago. And this is the Plaza de Platerías. This is now the entrance into the cathedral, as in the time of COVID. This is how you go in. There will be, if you go at the wrong time, there will be long, long lines because it's limited entrance to get in. Hopefully that's going to disappear sooner or later. And I love this entrance because this is really the only entrance that maintains its Romanesque, the original entryway. Although the things have been changed, but you get the sense here of, with the rounded arches, you get the Romanesque architecture. And I always show my students two things on this entryway. That one is going to be right here, and one is right here, so that you can look for them when you get there. The first thing is I love showing them the adulteress. This is that girl here. She is condemned to kiss the skull of her lover every day. So that's why the skull is on her lap. You know, they like those kinds of things, right? And the other thing is this crismon, which is, you see these in lots of places, but this one's unusual, and I don't know whether the sculptor intended it this way or not, but we use it a very special way. I've heard lots of people say this. Normally what you would have is an alpha and an omega, because you're the beginning, Christ is the beginning and the end. But if you notice here, we have the omega and then the alpha. So I told my students, this is the end of your Camino and the beginning of your new life. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it makes for a great story. And I borrowed that from someone. That isn't original. So, okay, so we leave the plaza and we walk around to the right. And I'm sure some of you have seen the pictures here. I call him the Phantom Pilgrim. Some people call him the Shadow Pilgrim. It has to be dark. And as you walk to the right around from the Platerías door, you will see this. There's an asterisk there. It will not be there if there's a concert going on in the square, because this is where the beer truck will be. So hopefully there won't be concerts on the whole time that you're there. But there is another magical Shadow Pilgrim, but this is much. It has to be special. You have to really work to get to see this, and I owe this to Mary Jane Dunn. She's the one who taught me about this other Shadow Pilgrim, because there are certain conditions that must be met if you're going to go see that pilgrim. Number one, it has to be a sunny day, and we all know that in Santiago, sunny days are maybe, yes. Okay, so that's number one, it has to be a sunny day. And two, you have to be there at the right time. And the right time is when the sun comes up over the building behind. June, it's probably around 9 o'clock. And if those two conditions are met and you were there at the right time, you get to see the daytime pilgrim. Not quite the same, but it's still a pilgrim. And that's kind of cool because that's the only time I've ever seen it. Mary Jane said, meet me there at 9, and I did. We stood there and waited for the sun to come up, and there it was. Okay, so if you keep walking past the Shadow Pilgrim, you come to the Holy Door, and if you go to Santiago this year, it's open. It isn't all that special once you walk in. I mean, there's nothing particularly wonderful to see, but you have walked through the Holy Door. It's something you can only do every so often. So it's a special treat. So there you go. However, again, there's crowd control in the cathedral, and crowd control going in to see the Holy Door. Were you able to hug St. James? St. James is unhuggable.
And that's the only way you can get to the.
And that's the only way you can get into it. And it's blocked off, so you can't get into the cathedral. It's crowd control. It's all crowd control. You are only allowed to go down to the crypt. And after you go down to the crypt, you wander around and look a little bit. They are allowed to move around. You have to you may see these. Has anyone seen these before? These are called stone mason marks. And back in medieval times, when you did your block of stone, you put your mark on it so you would get paid. And so, depending on how the stone was put into the building, sometimes these marks show, sometimes they obviously would have been on the back side. You wouldn't get to see them. So as you go through the cathedral, if you see these funny little marks, you'll know that somebody actually took that piece of rock and carved it into that shape and then put his mark on the stone. So that's very cool. So when you're walking around, either in the cathedral or around, going down to the crypt to see St. James's bones, you might look for them. Anyway, as you leave the Holy Door area, you now come out separate. You don't go out through the cathedral, which is what you would have done before. And as I turned around, walking out this little walkway and looked back, there are the Romanesque bones of the church that have been completely covered over almost everywhere else. And so I like Romanesque art and architecture. Can you tell? I thank my students. Anyway, you normally will not be able to see any of this because it's been blocked off by gates and other things have been put in front of it, because Romanesque architecture was popular in the 11th and 12th centuries. Who wants that in the 14th when the Gothic cathedrals are going up? And they actually were talking about tearing down the cathedral and building a Gothic cathedral in its place. They ran out of money, fortunately. Okay, so you come up the staircase, and we're going to walk back around to the Plateria store, and this is the Plateria Square. Lovely square, isn't it? And back here, we have a building called the Casa del Cabildo. It's an 18th century building. And it was built because the square didn't look complete. There were some houses there or something. And I also read that it was difficult for the carts to get past. And so if you look at it on the side, it is a total of about 9 feet wide. That's it right there. And it is a facade. It belonged to Cabildo, that ties it to the cathedral. It was expropriated in 1836 when a lot of church property and unused property was expropriated by the government in an attempt to economic development. And so it now belongs to the Consorcio de Santiago, which is, they sort of promote cultural things. And so I've been to a number of wonderful art exhibits in this building. Now, the rooms are kind of narrow. You have to keep walking from room to room and then up and down the stairs. But it's a lovely building. It's been restored, well worth it, free. Free exhibitions, and there it is. You don't miss it, depending on what
buildings behind it? Are they occupied? You say it's a facade.
That's the museum. It's those 9 feet of building. So, yes, they are occupied. Okay, so here is my favorite street in Santiago, the Rua Vilar. It just has charm. And so as you walk down the street, there are a number of things that I think you should visit. And the first is the Cafe Casino. Yes, it's my favorite place, favorite casino. But that gives us a little bit of history about what is a casino. And we think casino, we think Las Vegas, gambling and all that. It was a social club. And this, in the 19th century, a lot of cities had a casino where the well-to-do families would get together, mainly the men. They would get in there and they would play cards and probably were gambling. But they also had social events, and they also had cultural events where they might get together and discuss politics and sports or bullfighting or whatever, depending on the groups of interests of the people there. It closed in 2002. You know, it's kind of had lost its need, perhaps. Maybe there just weren't people who didn't want to do it. So it reopened as a cafe open to all of us. And you should be sure to at least go have one coffee either outside, and it's usually packed if the weather is nice, or you can go inside. And it is absolutely gorgeous. Wood panels, stained glass windows. It's a little dark here, you can't quite see it, but the waiters kind of glare at you when you take pictures, but too bad. Anyway, they're big, comfy armchairs by the window, and those are the chairs that you want to score if you want to sit there. You can have a coffee and sit there, buy a coffee and sit there for 2 hours, and they will not kick you out. It might be a little pricier than other places, but well worth it. Okay, so that's the Cafe Casino. Actually, upstairs there's a ballroom. And if you have read, there's a novel called The House of the Troya, which is about life in Santiago at the turn of the century. It's a young man who studied in Santiago. He actually went to a dance upstairs in the ballroom. So if you go further down, you come to what they call the narrowest street in Santiago. It is not. It is 35 inches wide. There's another one that's 30 inches wide, called the Ruela Oliveira, but it's kind of off the beaten path, and it's not anywhere near as charming as this street. So each one of those stones going up has a number on it. I'm not sure why, but it's kind of nice. 1, 2, 3. And up at the top, you see the sign, Bar Restaurante Entre Ruas. This is called the Entre Ruas Alley, because Entre Ruas means between the Ruas, and this is a shortcut that you walk up from the Rua Bilar up to the street above, so you don't have to go all the way around through the square that's another block or so down. So there is this bar, Restaurante Entre Ruas. I've never been there when it hasn't been packed. This is not fine food. This is not, it's home-cooked food, basic home-cooked food, just like you were saying yesterday. But this is not the elegant home-cooked food. This is where the people come to eat a good meal that tastes like grandma made. What? So what I love about this place, there's no menu. The menu is on the wall. And here, guys, I tell you, I am technologically challenged. Oh, it's loving. It's going back and forth. Stop. Okay. 1, 2. Okay. Here's the menú da casa. It's all in Gallego. It's not in Spanish. So here, you're caldo galego and pechuga de polo. Anyway, you can kind of figure it out. And they do have a menú del día, $13.20. Prices are going up. Don't be shocked if you go back. Anyway, the food is filling. And it's good. It's nothing to write home about. But it's packed. And if a restaurant is packed, that must mean it's a good place to go. So anyway, you're at the bar. You keep following through your plaza and you dogleg up to the Rua Nova, and I want to take you to this church. It's the Church of Santa Maria Salome. If you remember, we've already learned that Salome is St. James's mother. Don't think that there are too many churches dedicated to Maria Salome. And it was a Romanesque church, and it's had other stuff put on it, as most churches have. But what's inside, there's something I want to show you inside that to me is very special. And that is this altar of San Andres. You can tell it's San Andres because it's got the X, which is the cross he was crucified on. I don't love it because my son's name is Andrew, but anyway. I want to show you two little things that are down here. They're two little angels, and they're wearing glasses. Weird things in Santiago. Okay, so we head back down. We're going to go through that square that we didn't. We went up the Entre Ruas to miss the Plaza do Toral. And I love this. It's a manor house. It's some rich person's house. He's got up on the top Hercules with the world on his shoulders. Atlas. But anyway, one of them guys. I thought it was either or. But anyway, okay. And right down from that is the oldest pharmacy in Santiago. You can tell it was founded in 1843. And when you go in, it looks like what an old pharmacy should have looked like. This is not my picture. They don't like you taking pictures. I'm sure they're tired of tourists coming in, snap, snap, snapping. But again, you see that beautiful woodwork that we saw back in the Café Casino. And then walk on out the Pacheira Gate, and you're in the Parque de Alameda. And this is a very, very popular place to take a picture. But I think what we really need to know is the story of these two women. They were members, as you can see, you've got their dates. They were an anarchist family. Their brothers were very active in the anarchist labor union in Santiago. And when the war broke out in 1936, Santiago, the whole Galicia region is an extremely conservative region, was then, still is pretty much today. So they immediately went to the rebel side, which is Franco, the dictatorship. And which is nice because there were no bombs, no fighting in Santiago, so nothing got destroyed, which is the positive. On the negative, these two women, they couldn't find the brothers. They knew that they were going to get into trouble, and they left. And so the fascists who were in charge of the government at this time picked on these women. And they stripped them naked in the streets, made them drink castor oil, basically humiliated them. And as they say here, they were victims in 1936 and during the Franco dictatorship. So they basically went crazy. They had no way of earning money. People actually were donating food to them surreptitiously so that they did not die of hunger. It's a very sad story. But every day at 2 on the dot, they would go strolling through the streets. And you can see their colors. You didn't dress that way under the Franco dictatorship. You wore navy blue, gray, black, maybe a red sweater. You did not dress like that. And they would go out because that's when the young men came out of the university. And they would, as they say in Spanish, echar piropos. They would make comments to these young men. And that was the entertainment. The statue was put up in 1994. And it's a wonderful place to go get a picture taken. But you need to know the story. They have become an icon of the city of Santiago, but they were victims up until very recently. You can also go see the statue of the writer, Ramon del Valle Inclán, and you can see people like to come and stroke his shoes and his knees, and anyway. And if you walk on further out past his statue, you get the iconic view of Santiago, etc. Okay, so you come back, there's this wonderful little, back down at the entrance, near where the Duas Marias are, and it's the bench of whispers. And if somebody sits on this side and somebody sits over on the other side, if you whisper, it gets carried around to the other side. And so young lovers would come here, and the girl would be sitting with her chaperone on the one side and the guy's on the other side, and he can whisper, and it goes, because he could talk to her that way. This, I think, is, I'm a cat lover. These are controlled cat colonies in Santiago, where they capture the cats, they neutralize them, I mean, they neuter them. and then they feed them so that they can live a happy cat life in Santiago. And there's several of these around the city. Actually, looking for these marcas de propiedad, I found them. And they even have a street sign for them. It says in Gallego, "Let them cross." And this, if any of you know who Johnny Walker Santiago is, anyway, he got a couple of feral cats in his backyard. And so he called these people. They'll come and get them. And this cat, she got taken care of. But she came back to Johnny's house and let him know she wasn't terribly happy about what happened to her. Anyway, there were some very funny comments on his Facebook page. Okay, so we're going to quickly, I'm running out of time, I'm talking too much. As you walk back to the Obradoiro Square, you may have noticed this. This is called the Tree of Knowledge. If you don't know what you want to study in the university, you're supposed to turn your back to it and point, and that's what you're supposed to study. And so at nighttime, you've got to have some entertainment. So you can go, and it's the portico directly opposite the cathedral. The tuna shows up. This is a university, medieval singing group. They would sing for their supper, basically. Their symbol is a fork and a spoon crossed, because they were singing for their supper. And you may note they look a little older than university students, but I think they figured out that the tourists are coming and they can make some bucks. But it's lovely. They sing Spanish tuna songs, they're sort of folk songs, and they really, it's delightful. It's a lot of fun. And back there where that gallego, that gaita, the bagpipe player will be, they usually have people who will come and entertain. And this gentleman was singing opera arias and Frank Sinatra tunes, New York, New York, and you can just see, I mean, people are loving it. So that there's lots going on in Santiago in the night. So that's what I've explored, but I have a new thing that I'm going to be looking for the next time. Game boards. This is fascinating. These are game boards that are actually carved into the stone. They're found in public spaces, doorways, stairways. They're from the 16th and 17th century. This was a time when Spain was very wealthy for a certain part of the population, and there was another part of the population that was very poor. And so they would hang out outside convents and monasteries waiting for alms to be distributed. And so they would play on these game boards waiting for the food to be handed out. And just like the Marcas de Propiedad, as renovations take place, they're starting to be destroyed. I haven't found many of them, but these are the kinds of things, these are pictures from a website that, and I didn't put the link there, sorry. But you can see that they've been carved into the stone. And there's another map, so I'm going to be out there on my map while I'm there this May and June. I'm going to see if I can find some of these. I haven't really, well, maybe we'll see. Maybe it's still coming. Anyway, this is one that I did find, and you can barely see, but you've got a circle there, circle there, circle there, and I think there's some that are in the middle that are missing. This is basically tic-tac-toe. That's what they were playing. And there's George's chain that marks the. Remember, this was not a parador. This was a hospital for sick pilgrims, and so they would have been handing out food. And you can see there that there's another game board. So that's kind of cool. So anyway, this is cool. Okay, so you're in Santiago. Don't miss these museums. You've got the Cathedral Museum. If you go on the roof tour, which is called the Cubiertas, doesn't sound like roof, if you know Spanish, or if you pay for the Portico de la Gloria tour, they both cost money. You get a discount if you're a pilgrim with your credential. You get a free entrance to the Cathedral Museum, but you can also go to it for free. There's a museum called the Museum of Pilgrimage. It's right there in the Plateria Square. Amazing, well done, discount for pilgrims. And this museum that I love, it's an ethnographic museum, It has everything that you could ever imagine was used as part of life in Galicia. Musical instruments, cooking instruments, clothing, farming, and they even have 3 boats, full-size boats, on the bottom floor. Don't miss it. And I think that that's it.
I was there in 2014 and I noticed a lot of little statues of fat naked men. Is there a purpose for that? Are they still there?
Statues of naked men?
Yes!
Where?
You didn't see them.
No, where were they? Oh, you mean little sculptures up on the facade? Carved things, or were they things in the street? Oh yeah, they'll point those out. Oh yeah, they're under the eaves of the buildings, and often they were used. But the person who was carving was mad at somebody, and so or they hadn't paid him enough money, and so they would. Yes, I know. I've seen some bare bottoms. You're right. There's one on the cathedral roof tour that they point out, and there's one on the Parador.
Although if somebody asks you what you're looking for in Santiago, I wouldn't say I'm looking for pictures of naked men. I'm just saying.
Life-size.
Is there any other questions? That was fun.
What's the name of the park that the two Marias are at?
The Parque de Alameda, the Alameda Park.
And one more. We'll do one more. Here, back here.
I'm curious how you happened to go on Camino in 1975. I don't think most of us had ever heard of it then. 74.
Because there was someone who was way more imaginative than I ever could be. A man named David Gitlitz. He was he was interested in everything. And so he was in in Madrid that year as a director of the Indiana, Purdue, Wisconsin Study Abroad program. He had learned something that most of us have learned as professors. If you get a group of students to go on a trip, you get to go for free. Which I don't think that was his intention, but that's what ends up happening. He as Mary Jane said yesterday, he had read Walter Starkey's book, and he wanted to recreate the medieval pilgrimage. There were no yellow arrows, there were no albergues, there was nothing. And all he had was he had Spanish Army topo maps, but he knew the historical route has been well described. And so we started in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, walked over to Roncesvalles. We had a support van. We had a support car so that we were not carrying backpacks. I did not walk over the Pyrenees. It broke my heart, except they got lost. And at midnight, they finally said, we're down in Borghete. Will you come get us, please? And so I drove down, drove them back up. But then we would just, you know the route, Puente la Reina, Estella, and that's how and so we would start walking. We walked on the highway. We'd sometimes say in a village, how do I get from here to here? And the farmer would say, well, take this little dirt road. We got lost a lot. And that was a wonderful thing. You would get to go up and talk to the farmer in his field and say, how do we get to here? And he would, we'd go across the field sometimes, or, it was, I don't know, we called him Father Goose, Papa Ganso, because it was all females. There were 7 of us on the trip, and it was all women. And so we just followed him along, and it was the most amazing experience of my life. Put it that way. Life-changing, yes. Although he never meant it to be a life-changing experience. He wanted me to learn what it was like to be a medieval pilgrim. And I did, but it was also life-changing.
Very good. That looks like a good place to